This is From Anxiety to Love Radio, the show about undoing anxiety through A Course in Miracles and other pathways of love. Gain insights and tools to deepen your awareness of the peace that already exists within you. I'm your host, Corinne Zupko, author of the award-winning and best-selling book, From Anxiety to Love. Hello, spiritual family. Welcome to today's episode of From Anxiety to Love Radio. I have a great lesson to share with you today that I am sure you are going to relate to if you've ever had a quote-unquote bad day in your life. LOL, right? We've all had bad days. Before we dive in, I have a gift I want to share with you. I was recently a guest on the Teachers of God Foundation's weekly show called TGF TV. The title of my show is The Miracle Worker's Path of Spiritual Evolution, and I absolutely loved talking about this topic. A Course in Miracles helps us evolve. It helps us save time in our evolution by working miracles. And miracle working involves shifting our perception and extending love. So in this episode of TGF TV, we will explore these two interrelated avenues of miracle working and how they can support your spiritual evolution and sneaky ego diversions to watch out for, like that super sneaky spiritual ego. So you can watch this episode of TGF TV for free at FromAnxietyToLove.com/TGF TV. So I hope you love it as much as I do, and I will leave a link to this episode of TGF TV on the show notes page. So let's move onwards with today's episode. I can honestly tell you that because of my work with A Course in Miracles, I rarely have what I would call quote-unquote bad days anymore. Now, to be completely transparent, of course, I still experience challenges. I still identify primarily as a body and as a human. So I'm not referring to not having challenges arise anymore. But it's how I see those challenges, how I meet those challenges, whether or not I choose to suffer from them. And this determines whether or not something is a quote-unquote bad day. So at the same time, however, I also experience many days that are really in the flow. I feel often a sense of ease that permeates everything, and I feel just so in tune and in sync with love and with my brothers and sisters, regardless of what might be happening on the level of form. So since I often experience this relative smoothness in my days, this sense of ease, when quote-unquote bad days do show up, I really notice them. They really capture my attention. So I had a bad day not too long ago, and it was a day where literally everything was going wrong, and I just felt completely out of sync with life. So here's the quick version of the story. I woke up feeling off. Nothing too remarkable, just a little uneasy. I felt aimless, like I didn't really have a purpose that day, and I just wasn't sure how to feel productive. In the late morning, I was being interviewed online, and the host had multiple distractions come up during the video interview, which made the whole experience quite challenging. After that was over, I tried to just clear my head and go outside and figure out again how I could best spend my day and how to try to feel, in sync again. And one of my lap chickens, which if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you know I have pet chickens and I love them. And one of my lap chickens jumped onto my lap and cuddled up, and I noticed that her eyelid looked infected and purple, which of course, I didn't want to see. I went to the farm supply store to get eye drops, and she was just not cooperating. She was not happy with me. I was not happy with her. It was just so frustrating. So I moved on from that, and I noticed something else in my yard that made me even more upset. So I've been wanting to plant peach trees for years. I absolutely love my homegrown fruits and veggies, and Early last spring, we finally located peach trees for sale. I think they were at Home Depot. I couldn't find them anywhere, and one year they just popped up. So we planted 2 of them, and to our surprise, within 2 months of planting these peach trees, they were already producing peaches. They had these little green fuzzy peaches all over them, and I was beside myself with excitement, like already looking up and researching when they'd be ready and when I could eat them in the summer. So at this time, however, when I was in my backyard during my bad day, I noticed that a squirrel got into the fenced off area where the peach tree was growing, and it was filling up its little belly full of unripened peaches. It literally knocked every single baby peach off the tree, took a bite of like each one and just left them there. And I was so upset. I was like, no, all my peaches are gone. So that was like another thing that happened. I decided then, I think that morning I also spilled my smoothie on the floor. I just decided I need to get out. I needed to start over. I needed a reset. So I decided to leave my house and drive up to where my husband was working near the beach. And about halfway there, he called me to tell me he got off work early and was coming home early. And literally that's while I was on the road to go see him. So we were like traveling in opposite directions. So at this point, I was just so frustrated. That's when I finally paused and finally turned within and said, there's got to be another way. There's a sentence in A Course in Miracles that I want to highlight. And this quote says, "Your part is merely to return your thinking to the point at which the error was made and give it over to the atonement in peace." The atonement you can think of as the forgiveness process, the undoing of fear process. And that has to begin by handing things over to Holy Spirit. So again, this quote, "Your part is merely to return your thinking to the point at which the error was made and give it over to the atonement in peace." My mind went to my favorite reset button in A Course in Miracles. We've always referred to it on my Sunday night study group as page 90. It's page 90 in the FIP edition. It's the prayer that goes, "I must have decided wrongly because I am not at peace. I made the decision myself, but I can also decide otherwise. I want to decide otherwise because I want to be at peace." And the prayer goes on. So I really began to reflect on what was going on in my day and why it was that I felt totally off. So this first sentence, "I must have decided wrongly because I am not at peace," prompted me to look within. Where did I decide wrongly? Where did my mind go that led to feeling so frustrated, so easily annoyed and irritated and just mad? Because again, I felt pretty horrible. The answer came rather quickly. I judged. Let me explain. Let me give some backstory. So about 1 or 2 days before this bad day, before this day of just feeling out of sync with the universe, there was a political situation in the United States that had many people upset, and I was one of them. I took action in a way that I felt moved to, but I didn't stop there. I personally knew people who felt very differently than I did about this political situation, and I judged them. I judged them harshly. They were wrong, and I was right, and that was my official political position, that they were wrong and I was the right one. By the way, if you don't already know this, I'm sure you do, politics are a playground for the ego, with each side projecting hatred and attack onto the other side. And as I've said before in my Course in Miracles study group, whether it's Democrat or Republican, these are two sides of the same ego coin. So A Course in Miracles teaches that whenever you are not wholly joyous, this is another quote, "Whenever you are not wholly joyous, it is because you have reacted with a lack of love to some brother that God created." I'm going to read that one more time. "Whenever you are not wholly joyous, it is because you have reacted with a lack of love to some brother that God created." So I had reacted to these brothers with a lack of love. That was where I decided wrongly. What made me feel horrible, the mistake that I made, was my harsh judgment of my brothers. Now, this judgment caused a feeling of separation from these others to grow, so the gap widened between us. But the problem is, those others are literally part of me. So in my judgment, I separated myself from them, making me right, them wrong, and I solidified the separation between us. I widened that seeming gap, and this is where I went wrong. It was my reaction of a lack of love. The result was me waking up a day or two later with no recollection of this having anything to do with it, but with that subtle sense of feeling off. And when I went through my off day, all of my experiences, maybe which would have happened no matter what, were met with my own sense of frustration and building stress, instead of my more frequent attitude of feeling tuned into spirit, trusting, and just allowing things to unfold. So the truth is, I cannot remember heaven or remember the truth without being willing to see that truth in others, no matter how they're behaving or no matter what it is that they're saying, whether I disagree with it or agree with it. And I have to tell you that I absolutely love this quote from A Course in Miracles. It goes, "The alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain." So if we're being alert to the errors of our brother's ego, we must be seeing through ours. And I will read another quote to you. It says, "Errors are of the ego, and correction of errors lies in the relinquishment of the ego." When you correct a brother, you are telling him that he is wrong. He may be making no sense at the time, and it is certain that if he is speaking from the ego, he will not be making sense. But your task is still to tell him he is right. You do not tell him this verbally if he is speaking foolishly. He needs correction at another level because his error is at another level. He is still right because he is a son of God. His ego is always wrong no matter what it says or does. Wow, isn't that a great quote? So our brothers are going to say things that we don't agree with. And if we are engaging on that level, we're coming from our own ego. Our job as a miracle worker is still to, quote unquote, tell him he is right. In other words, by joining with the truth of that other person from the truth of who you are. We're then affirming the oneness between us, affirming that we are both children of God, rather than affirming that we are separate from one another. So the way out of anything is the relinquishment of the ego. The way out of anything is the relinquishment of the ego. This relinquishment of the ego is a process, and we really engage in this process by returning our awareness back to the truth and allowing spirit to move through us and breathe us. I also just want to emphasize again, there's that Course in Miracles quote that I love, that if you are alert to the errors of your brother's ego, you must be seeing through yours, your own. Ouch. A Course in Miracles gives us no slack. So if we are alert to the errors of our brother's ego, it is because we are seeing through our own. So there it is again, our job to be willing to affirm the truth in another beneath what it is that they're doing or saying, and join at that level. So I guess another way of saying all of this is that we engage in this process of undoing the ego by bringing our minds back to the point of the error, handing that error over, and asking for the miracle instead. This undoes the error. We love instead of separate, and we experience peace within ourselves because we saw it in another. And when we truly allow this, a happy outcome is involved for everyone. Now, do we always need to know the point at which we made the error? I don't believe we do. We could spin off into analysis and get totally paralyzed by trying to figure out where we went wrong. So it's really important to be willing to see the error and to trust that we'll be shown the error if we need to see it. It's always important that we just come back to our willingness to see differently. So when I realized what was going on, when I realized the ego trap I fell into, I took responsibility for it. I took responsibility for seeing through my own ego, and I turned to Spirit and I said, I am willing. I don't want this. I give this to you. Show me a miracle instead. And I did have to go for a nice long walk to just sort of burn off some excess energy, but my day ended very differently from how it started. I felt a healing. I felt love toward my brothers where I experienced judgment before. And I know on a deep level that had an effect on my brothers and on the situation of the world as a whole. This work is healing. We do not heal alone. So I hope that story was really helpful and will really encourage you to stop and pause and look more closely when life feels out of sync, when you feel out of sync with the universe. So here are some takeaways for this episode. Number 1, identify where you are not at peace. Ask yourself, am I feeling off today? Where am I not at peace? And identify at least one area where you might feel off. And you can come back later to apply this process to other areas, but just pick one for now. So identify one place where you're not at peace. So that's step 1. Step number 2 is to take responsibility. So say to yourself, I'm not at peace because I chose to react with a lack of love to some brother that God created. I chose to believe that we are separate from each other. So that's step number 2. So step number 1, identify where you're not at peace. Step 2 is to take responsibility and say that I chose to react with a lack of love. Step number 3, ask to be shown where you went wrong. If you need to see it, you will see it. And if you don't know where you reacted lovelessly, simply find your willingness to undo the error of where you went wrong. Step number 4, hand over the error or hand over your willingness to undo the error. If you don't know what the error was, hand that all over to Spirit. Number 5, remind yourself of the truth. You are safe, wholly innocent, and worthy of love, and so is everyone else. And finally, number 6, use the page 90 prayer, I must have decided wrongly because I am not at peace. This full prayer is an easy alternative to all of the above steps. It's on page 90 of the Foundation for Inner Peace edition, and you can find the references to all of the other editions on the show notes page. And I'm so grateful to share this journey with you. If you want these steps all typed up along with my Course in Miracles quote references, please come on over to the show notes. It's available at FromAnxietyToLove.com/23. Again, that's FromAnxietyToLove.com/23. Let's keep up our amazing work together. The more we can see and take responsibility for our quote-unquote miscreations, as the Course calls them, our judgments, our fear, our guilt, the more we can take responsibility for these things, the more we can release our blocks to the awareness of love, so we can then share that love easily with the world. Thank you so much. I love you. I am with you in your journey of undoing fear. I'll leave you with the last few sentences from my book, From Anxiety to Love. I believe in you. We're healing together. Every gain that I've made is a gain for you, and every gain that you make is a gain for me. My gains are yours, and yours are mine because we are one. We're going to make it. The light in you is too bright to fail. If you buy a copy of From Anxiety to Love, make sure you take advantage of your free bonus, the From Anxiety to Love Summit, which features 6 interviews with experts in undoing fear. Get access at FromAnxietyToLove.com/summit. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.